Okay, welcome back everyone. So before going forward with our next topic, so Sophia is planning to do some work on a feature which is related to NFS encryption, and she had a doubt specifically to NetApp and Dell folks because they use the base generic NFS like the remote FS driver for their uh, personal NFS drivers. So, Sophia, if you're around, you can. Okay, I think Sophia's not around yet, so I will go ahead and ask the question. Okay, I see Sophia here. Okay, yeah, you can ask the question.
Hey, I just joined.
So I was just mentioning, like, you can ask a question regarding NFS encryption feature to the Dell and NetApp people and other vendors who are pursuing to implement their NFS drivers.
Sure. Oh, that's great. I know NetApp and Dell has NFS driver that depends on generic NFS. My question, currently I'm working on encryption on NFS.
So I think, Sophia, I'm losing your audio in between.
Yeah.
And I think others as well. Okay, so if you can just repeat the question.
Sorry. Eric and I. No.
We just heard Eric and I, and then nothing else. But the weird thing is that the words that we hear from you are pretty clear. It's just that suddenly we stop hearing anything. It's not broken. It's not fakey. It's just nothing. Silence.
Hello. Okay, let's try one.
Ye-
Just Eric and I, we are working on the NFS encryption. I know NetApp and Dell team has NFS drivers that maybe impact on this work. My question to NetApp and Dell team or any that's interested and has NFS driver is if the encryption is something you think you will implement on your side. If you potentially will use the feature, or you have no plan on encryption regarding those drivers.
So JP speaking. So from the best I know, we have no plan using the NFS encryption right now, but we do have some discussions internally with some new storage platforms that may come in the next month, which can leverage the NFS encryption. So this is not something we plan to do right now, but this is something we have interest of in the future.
Okay.
Would those be leveraging front-end or back-end encryption? So I think what Sophia's asking about is front-end encryption, where we implement an encryption layer in Cinder and Nova. I think NetApp currently supports doing encryption on the back end that works completely differently. And so when we talk about vendor support for this, I mean, those are two very different things. Sophia, did you have any more context about what exactly we want to find out?
Yes. So, so my concern was if NetApp or Dell drivers will potentially use feature on their own drivers, and if that would be something they will potentially implement. Otherwise, leaving the encryption only on generic NFS wouldn't be much beneficial for Red Hat.
And Sophia, how much work would they need to do to actually leverage the work you're doing? So you're working on the base driver to support
Yes.
encryption correctly, and you're saying, okay, there are a couple of vendor drivers that use that class as the basis. So if they did a bit of work on their drivers, they could leverage that, and then it would not only be the vanilla NFS driver, but the other NFS driver would also support encryption. So my question is that, can you estimate if you do the base work, which I assume is the big part, how much work would they need to do to leverage this? Or would they get it for free mostly?
Question. I think, well, I'm not really familiar with the other drivers besides the generic, but it should be, like the work I'm doing, it should cover all the basic scenarios for volume. So I think it could be something straightforward, but I'm not completely sure. I don't know if Eric wants to add something.
When we add it to the generic NFS driver, it's basically going to show up in the drivers that inherit from that by default. The problem is I'm not sure that's actually a good thing, because in the case of the NetApp driver where they have encryption on the back end already, I think they probably don't want to do that. And we probably need to make sure we actually make it only work on the generic driver first, and then figure out the interactions with backends, because for backends that have backend encryption, it might not make sense. There's probably some interference with snapshot and clone operations that would be, you know, if you did this on the NetApp driver, it probably would interfere with some kind of optimized cloning new volume operation. And I really think we're not going to want to just turn it on for all the drivers, and each vendor probably needs to look at it and decide what they want to do.
That makes sense. Maybe enable it on the base one and make sure that the other drivers don't have it enabled, and just notify vendor maintainers, hey, we've added this, If you want to use it because you don't have backend encryption or whatever, or if backend encryption is not available in all your storage systems, you may want to have a look at this and just give a couple of pointers. You can see it working here. Feel free to enable it in your driver.
There's also stuff we'll have to document. I mean, if you are using Cinder with a backend and you're attaching these volumes to bare metal nodes, this can be problematic because we're working on it to be consumed by Nova. If you're consuming it with something else, it might not even have the infrastructure to use these volumes in the generic NFS encryption scheme. So it's we're going to have to document all of that kind of stuff and make sure that people understand the current effort is going to enable it for consumption with Nova and QEMU basically and nothing else. And depending on what different vendors you're targeting, that might be important to understand.
Here's Philippe from NetApp. Yeah, I think I have the same sense of what Eric said. Firstly, we don't have planned for, because we normally work on features that some customers request. So we have no customer requesting this kind of feature. We have a backend encryption feature on NetApp storage. I don't know if the customers are using this feature. From now, I have no feedback about this feature. At least I haven't gotten any bugs. So even it's working very well, or they are not using. So I think as long as it doesn't break NetApp driver, we won't add this feature right now. You know, you can just add to the NFS generic driver. And if in the future customer requests this kind of feature, we can try to address to add this to the NetApp drivers. From now, I think we can just disable for NetApp. I think that the NetApp driver won't use this feature right now. And in the future, if we decide to add, we can take the code and do the changes for having the feature work with NetApp driver.
Thanks,
Okay.
Felipe.
Thank you. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, I don't know if... Yes, go ahead, Eric.
Well, that probably means with the current work that's in flight for this feature now, we probably need to go into each of these drivers and add a check that says if it's requesting front-end encryption to not do it. Because I think it'll just show up there from the fact that it's in the NFS generic driver probably. Or it will half show up there, which might be even messier. But we need to go evaluate that.
For the case of Cinder as a glance backend, I did propose a patch, I think a few cycles ago when this work started out, to disable creating volumes if they are encrypted. So Glance currently blocks request for creating using encrypted volumes for like Cinder backed images. So just wanted to mention that. Do we have or need any inputs from the Dell team, similar to what NetApp has their vision for their driver?
I don't have any input for now. I will raise the question internally and get back to you as soon as possible.
Would be helpful.
Yeah, thank you.
So, Sophia, anything else you would like to know regarding this?
That is my question for the Dell and NetApp team. I will do a presentation in the crossover in the Nova cross participation. But that will be regarding the Nova implementation. This for now, that was my question. Thank you so much. I don't know if Eric has anything to add that I'm missing.
No?
I'm good from my side.
Okay.
Excellent.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Sophia, Eric.
Thanks,
And
Sophia.
just to mention, we have the cross project with Nova on Thursday at 1600 UTC. So if you're interested, please join that session. And with that, we can move to the next topic. Yep, just updating the OpenInfra channel. Okay, so I will just ping Pete on the Cinder channel. I'm not able to find Christian on anywhere in any channel. So yeah, I've pinged Christian, but I don't see his IRC being active. So yeah, not really sure. Should we conduct this on another day, or should we just discuss it right now? And just leave some notes for him to see later. I think we can quickly discuss this, and then if Christian wants to discuss this again, we can schedule something later during the PTG. So basically, the questions are regarding their use case, where when they were performing a long-running backup operation, they couldn't live migrate a volume because the volume status acts as a lock. So if the volume status is backing up, it cannot move to the flow of live migration, where it goes into the attachment phases like attaching, in use, reserved. So the backup process was blocking the live migration. Initially, they proposed a new field, new status field, task status, just like Nova has. But I think that introduces more problem than we already have. So we dropped the idea because we had to consider all the other operations that could be performed in parallel and see if there is no race conditions there. So we dropped that idea and finally moved on to to a resolution that we can add a new backup field in the volume attributes, and that would help us. That would during a backup, that state would change and the volume would still remain available because in a live migration we don't do any data operations in that. We just detach and attach it to another instance, another compute host. So that might be useful. So I think they proposed a new spec last cycle, but it was after the deadline. So I think they wanted to discuss that. That's one backup related feature, and another was regarding the encrypted backups, which I think Gorka wrote the spec for. So that also I think they want to get that in this cycle. So that's pretty much the overview.
Regarding the encryption, I wrote the spec. I think I didn't complete it, so I wrote the initial draft. There were comments, and I think I didn't follow up those comments, so probably the spec is in pretty bad shape. And that's probably what they wanted, one of the things they wanted to bring up, as in, what is going on with this one?
If they wanted more eyes on it, then surely we can go back to the specs and take another look.
I don't know if they want more eyes or me to just continue the work I started.
Okay.
So I don't know if somebody else is real to take up this spec, or if I am supposed to go back to it.
I'm not sure we have any takers, so maybe you would have to end up working on it. But
Yep.
Can.
Well, the thing is that they were going to work on the implementation. They were just asking for the spec. So probably to avoid the whole story that happened with their other spec for the one that you described about being able to live migrate a volume that it's in backup. What they probably wanted is to avoid the whole, we write a spec with this approach, then there is a lot of conversation, the spec doesn't go anywhere, then we write another one, doesn't go anywhere. They probably wanted to avoid that, but they were going to do the implementation themselves. They offered to do
it. That makes sense.
Let's see if I can get my head straight and get this done.
So another thing, I think another issue that is mentioned is when we have multiple Cinder backup services and we are scheduling a restore, so it can go to a Cinder backup service that doesn't have any is in another availability zone, and Yeah, I'm not very familiar with that case, but if someone is, they can really chime in.
Yeah, this seems to be a problem with the scheduler, right? That it's scheduling an operation to the wrong service. It's not taking into consideration availability zone, basically. It sounds just like a bug.
So I remember the create backup goes through the scheduler, but does the restore also go through it?
It does not.
Okay, so I think we will need to implement that flow then.
Not necessarily. It depends on how we are making the call. Because if I remember correctly, we were sending the request to one of the services that were up and running. I could be remembering it wrong. Let me double check. If that's the case, all we need to do is change the way we select where we send the request. And we have multiple ways of restoring a backup because we have the create volume flow as well, if I remember correctly, right? We have multiple ways.
Yeah, right. That is another way.
So yeah, this is basically a bug. How to fix it, I believe it's a different conversation. As in, yep, that's a bug. It should do the right thing. Backup services should also honor the availability zone. Out of curiosity, in Cinder, I just forgot. For the volumes, we can migrate between availability zones, right? We allow that.
I think so.
And I could be wrong, but I believe in most cases, availability zone, the way it's implemented, the feature only works with Nova so that they can prevent cross AC attachments, and also only works for the scheduler when creating volumes so that you can specify the availability zone manually or via volume type. And that's all we do with availability with ACs. I think we don't do anything else. You can backup cross AC probably. You can probably restore as well if there is connectivity.
I think the problem is that the backup manager service cannot access the volume in another availability zone. I'm not sure that should be the case, but yeah, that seems to be the issue.
I understand the issue, but I believe that also happens today if we do a retype from one availability zone to another. If there is no connectivity, it doesn't work.
Sorry, did I hear someone suggest that cross-AZ backups aren't a feature? I probably misheard because they definitely are.
You mean are a feature as in terms of they are meant to work, or
Yes.
in terms of yes? So, but as far as I understand, they work through the scheduler and everything, but we don't prevent it in any way. It's not optional, right? It's just like, yep, you can do cross AC backups just fine. We have no
Yeah, if I
way
remember
to
correctly,
prevent
you
it.
have to, well, I believe it's an opt-in. Meaning that, if you are doing a backup cross AZ, I think you have to, it's been a while since I played with the feature, but I think you have to somehow specify it in the API.
If I remember correctly, the way, I could be wrong, the way to do it for the restore is via the create volume, because the normal API didn't have it before. The restore backup didn't have that feature of specifying the AC. So the way to do it was through the create volume and specifying as the source a backup, right?
Yeah, I think and by we I mean me, I have to look it up. I did the code a while ago, but I think I did enhance the restore API so that you don't have to create the volume first and do a restore to volume.
Yeah, no, I mean that create volume supports a parameter, which is the source. You can source from a different volume, from an image, and from a backup. So if the source was backup, you could directly do cross AC. And if I could be wrong, but I think your improvement was on the client to accept the AC. And if the AC was in, you call the create volume API
Yes.
instead the old one.
That makes sense.
So because, yeah, the feature was, but we didn't want users to have to figure out different ways to make the call.
Right.
So ACs we currently have no way to limit the ACs in the backups, I believe.
I believe that's true.
There is also a bug report from the author. They have described the steps they face issue with.
Guys, I have a stupid question here, since there is a little small pause. Availability zone corresponds to something like a separate SAN, right? Or a bunch of volumes, to physical technology. Is that what it's for? That's why there is no connectivity between them. Like, for example, you have a host A and host B, and they are both connected over fiber channel to an array X. and then you have host C and host D, and they are connected, again, the fiber channel to the host Y. I'm sorry, array Y. And the X and Y, they're just separate arrays. There is no way to like issue an API call and transfer the volume anywhere between them, right? Unless you, right? Because the A and B connected to one array and C and D are connected to other array, and there is no like host M that's connected to both. So that's what availability zones are, right? Do I understand that right? Or maybe I'm asking for too much. But if you do a backup is on the network, on the IP connected network, and then you can restore it to either X or Y, to either of these arrays.
I've located the bug. I don't know. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I think I see the bug. I don't know if they have fixed it in their patch. Probably they fixed it in the same location.
So regarding your
Yeah, that's not sure. Yeah, I don't think, yeah, no, they're fixed. I think it's wrong. Because what they are changing is what backup service, if you look at the code that they have proposed, they are changing in the create volume. They are changing which backup service they have to send this to. But the availability zone must be that of the backup, not that of the volume. I don't like this whole changing here. I would suggest, yeah, we have to review it, but I don't think that's a good idea. Because a backup was created with a specific service on a specific availability zone. So their change is saying, oh, every backup that I have deployed have access to the same storage. And it doesn't matter the availability zone I set in the backup. But that also seems a bit weird. So yeah, this probably needs us to agree on what means an availability zone for backup services. What does it mean for each one of us? I mean, I don't know. If I say I have a backup service in availability zone 1, can it have a different backup location that one in availability zone 2 or not?
So if I understand correctly, like from a Nova perspective, how they use these availability zones is they group a bunch of compute nodes into one particular availability zone, and then they use it for scheduling purposes. Like, yeah, if we want VMs in a particular group. I think from Cinder side, as you mentioned, the support was implemented for cross-AZ attachments. Like if we have a volume in a different AZ and an instance in a different AZ, then do we want to attach that or not? I'm not really sure how much it makes sense for a backup, because I think this is a logical separation. And as Pete was trying to say, like, I don't think it's a physical separation of, like, the backup host doesn't have connectivity to the SAN storage, because I think they have their host connected, but it's just, yeah, I mean, we are trying to logically separate them, which for me doesn't make much sense for backups, but yeah.
Well, the thing is that I know there are customers using this where the availability zone, for example, is a different country. So everything is one cloud, but they have storage in different locations. Storage, for example, in Madrid, storage in South America. And they also create VMs, so they want the VMs to match the storage location. But if you consider that kind of deployment, if you have a backup system and you set availability zones to your backup system, you would also want the backup availability zone to match the volume availability zone. So when you say create a backup for this volume, you would want it to be, if possible, within that availability zone, because otherwise you're sending data across the ocean. It's like that's going to be too slow. So in theory,
yeah, I see what you're saying, but there is a difference between desirability of backing up things like that. It can be done for compliance purposes too. But if you want to restore, at times you really want to like do whatever backup is available. Maybe your whole data center burned down, so you have no choice but to fetch it from another country if it's possible.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
exactly.
Alan mentioned that this is why we have cross availability zone restore as a feature.
Yeah, but for example, I think where I think the bug is right now is not here. We would have to talk with the person reporting it. But the problem is that when you restore a backup and you just say, hey, restore this backup to a new volume, the create volume request does not include the availability zone within Cinder. It just says create this thing and it can go anywhere. And I think that, at least that, seems to be a bug for me.
Well, if you look at Etherpad, he reported a specific problem when you're trying to restore it on a host that does not have access to the zone that you specified.
Yeah, but it doesn't say why the volume is in that host. It doesn't say if the request to restore was just said, restore this backup, and no volume was provided. So a volume is scheduled to be created automatically by Cinder. And I believe that is the problem, that when we say created, let me look at the, provide a link to the, where I think the bug is. It's line 406 or something. Second, because it's probably going to be easier for me to explain this if I add it to here. I think this is if we go there, we have a line that says just create a volume. That does not include the availability zone of the backup. And it should be a soft requirement to try to match the availability zone of the backup. Is that like give more weight to the volume services that are within that region, within that availability zone. If there is one that can do it, restore there. If you don't have there, well, restore anywhere. In case, like Pete, you were saying, you want it just to recover it, you don't care, you don't even care where. It's just, I need it available again. So I think that is the At least that is one problem.
Okay.
In any
I
case,
think
we
that
would need
function
to.
actually has the information that it needs because context links to just about everything. So it could be implemented by looking at, taking into consideration what the backups availability zone is, right?
Exactly. You do backup dot availability zone, and you should have there the information. The problem is that if you pass that information to the create call,
All right.
I
it's not. Yeah.
I think it would be a hard requirement. And it would be backward incompatible, probably.
Well, do you want like call it twice? First with the, you know,
It could
the
be.
AZ specified, and then if that fails, then non-specified.
Mm-hmm. Could be. The problem is that, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. So the code becomes a little bit more complicated because you have to wait because right now we're waiting while it is creating. And if it's in error, we don't know at this point, because we're not the scheduler, why it failed. Did it fail because of the availability zone? Did it fail because there is no space? We don't know. So the retry seems a little bit weird. And I think we should have some way to tell the create that this is soft requirement. But
So
this
if
is
we
what
have
I
a
think it's the problem. I'm not sure.
if we have a config option, the operator I think knows we have a volume service in an availability zone, same as the backup. They can set if we want to pass the availability zone or not. I mean, delegate the task to the operator, and we don't do anything in our code. We just pass the availability zone if they have set that config option, and we don't if they haven't.
I see. So that based on the configuration option, they can do cross AC or not, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, it could be consistent with the way Nova has the cross AC attachment config option. This could be cross AC either backups or restores or whatever, and we would make it consistent to support it or not. Mm-hmm. But I don't know if that is. Yeah, that solves the problem. And that should be fine. But we have to confirm with them that that is the call that they actually made that failed. In case there are other gaps or other locations where this can not work as expected.
Okay.
And maybe we should kind of document this assumption, as in Cinder assumes that it has cross AC data connection for volumes and backups, because that's our current assumption. In storage, everything is connected. That is our assumption right now. You can attach a volume from anywhere. Any service can attach, cross AC, doesn't matter. We can do it. For volumes, for backups, that is our assumption right now. We can do retype between ACs, we can do migrate between ACs as long as the volume type allows it. We can do backups, restores. Like Alan said, this was actually a feature. So we probably need to recommend it. And when we fix it, add a note to say this can be restricted this way for backups.
I think you're taking it too far. Like imagine a place where they use LVM for storage, for volumes. Ah, just rejected. I see.
No, just kidding. So yeah, if they have LVM, it is still true that you can connect from anywhere because you do iSCSI or NVMe OF connections, and then you have access to the volumes, right?
Yeah, that way,
So,
yes.
but we always assume that Cinder volume and Cinder backup have access to the storage data network, and that storage data network connects everything for us.
I see.
I think that is our current assumption. Maybe it's not the best assumption, and we have to revisit that. But that's what we currently believe. Is like you have TCP/IP connection between all the volume and backup services, plus you may need HBA's connection. And that's our assumption. In Rajat, I like your idea. It's the easiest solution without going crazy with code changes. Allow cross AC or not. If you don't allow it, we have to pass the AC to the create request and maybe look at another couple of places. But yeah.
Yeah, I think the proposal was getting complex for me, so just suggested an easy way out. But yeah, surely if we have some better way to optimize this in our code also, then also would be good to have. So one question regarding snapshots. So I think the snapshots go to the same place where the volume resides. We don't have any availability zone concept with snapshots, right?
The snapshots are always, the way they work is they are always together with the volume. They cannot be somewhere else. So a snapshot and volumes are always on the same place. That's why the way we address the snapshot is we get the service for the volume. If it's a single one, you direct the request to the host. If it's a cluster one, you direct the request to the cluster that it's handling the same backend as the volume. If I remember correctly, that's why you don't even have the host value on the snapshot. Like the snapshot DB entry doesn't have that concept because it cannot be anywhere else.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, and as Pete mentioned, like I always see backups as a disaster recovery solution. So I have always read about it as it is in a remote site and not at all with the volume. So that's why the cost is immense.
Even if it's in a remote site, you could have it if you have in Europe and in the Americas, you would want your backup to be at least in the same region. You know, your backups are not in the same site, but they are in the same availability zone in terms of, yeah, the backups of the Americas are in that continent at least.
Yeah, surely that makes sense. Like based on the type of separation we are doing, if it's on geological basis, like region wise, continent wise, then yeah, it makes sense, as you said.
Well, I think this is a conversation we will have to have with Tobias.
Yeah, I was going to ping him, but he already mentioned he can't attend the meeting, so yeah, we can. I can talk to him later and see if he wants to discuss this again. But I think in the meantime, we can, if you want to pursue the same patch they have proposed, we can leave comments, or someone can propose a new patch for the fix. If they would like
I'm
to.
not going to commit to this because I already have the the spec that I left forgotten there set up.
Okay, then if someone would like to work on it, then they can, but maybe Tobias could also would like to work on it, so yeah, we can leave it up to him also. Yeah, I've added that as an action item. So if someone wants to take this task up, or I can discuss with the author, and if you would like to work on it, he can. Okay, any other things you would like to discuss on this, or should we move to the next topic? Okay,
Sounds like
Pete
we
is
are done.
Okay. Yeah, looks like Pete is interested. So yeah, let's get back to it later. Yeah, let me update the channel. So next topic is regarding EM versus UL for Rocky and Stein and in general. So Brian, before you go into it, I recently read an email from Elot, and I think there is a conflict between some people that want to still keep Rocky alive based on the recent CV we had, and yeah, Elot said that they would be discussing about it. But yeah, sorry, just wanted to mention that. You can go ahead.
Sure. So what kind of prompted this? If you look at that link I just put on line 156 in the Etherpad, we're just failing all the Pi 27 tests in Rocky. And so the question was, should we fix it or not? Or at least the question for me. So I remembered that Rajat had proposed this, that we're going to EOL it, and Elod had proposed it to the mailing list. So I went to see what the status of that was. And Jeremy Stanley explained that my conception of what the extended maintenance is supposed to mean might be a little, well, was basically wrong. So the idea with the extended maintenance, so let me, so I've got a link to the discussion we had on line 158 in the Etherpad. But the actual, you don't have to read the whole thing. If you do take that link, if you go down to the time 1624, or no, 1620, he explains the idea of the extended maintenance is that the project team does not have to take responsibility for the gates being open. So the extended maintenance branches are the ones that are no longer releasable. So basically at this moment, I think it's Wallaby and older, and it's about to become Xena and older. So I don't know how, I mean, my feeling about that has been once the gates are no longer functional to run Tempest tests, we should probably, end of life things and close it because there's not much there that's actually being tested anymore. But I think it's got to do with really what you, how you want to view what these branches are for. So this happened with the recent CVE. We backported it as far as train because I wanted to make sure we hit a location where there was Python 2 still being used. So if people needed to backport it farther than that, at least they had an example of something that worked in Python 2. And a requirement, even with those, is that we agree that we will always backport security fixes to all the open stable branches, so the ones that are releasable from. And then anything older than that is just on a done as a courtesy or on a best effort basis. So we really only had to go back as far as Wallaby, I guess. But anyway, I guess the question, so Zigo brought up, look, I'm really interested in Rocky. I still support Rocky as being packaged. And if we end of life Rocky, the policy is that Rocky goes end of life and the branch is deleted. And then what happens is you can't even post this patch in Gerrit to get people to look at it. So, and it's not that they want to impose a burden on the project team saying that, look, we've posted that. I mean, of course they would like us to look at it, but they're not saying that you must do it. It's just that if you want to collaborate, there's no place to do this unless you fork OpenStack and then set up some other kind of thing where you're going to do the code review. And since OpenStack uses Gerrit, everybody's used to using Gerrit. That's what they would like to do. So I guess, so anyway, so that's the basic position. So we don't have to have everything working in those locations. We can leave it up to the wider community, not the project team, to keep the gates moving if they really want to. And that starts as soon as anything goes into extended maintenance. So under that view, it might make sense to not end of life some of these if there's still community interest in the branches being available. And I don't know whether we would want to make some kind of statement and say, look, as far as the project team is concerned, we're willing to keep things open through, I don't know, Xena or something. Or if we just want to say, once it goes extended maintenance, we're really kind of hands off. And if anyone has a particular interest in getting stuff merged into those older branches, then part of what you have to do is get the gates running again in order to merge stuff.
I find it interesting that there are so many Red Hat people heavily involved in Cinder, and we're talking about dropping Wallaby, which is going to be the base for 17.0, 17.1. So I find that interesting. But going back to what we do with Rocky, we have to EOL things at some point. And just because one person says they have interest in it doesn't mean we shouldn't EOL it. It's a problem for them that they're running Rocky. They've got a lot of problems in Rocky. There's a lot of patches. There's a lot of features missing. They really should be encouraging people to move up. Mirantis, their OpenStack platform is stuck on Queens. But they don't complain that Queens doesn't exist anymore.
My concern could be that even if the gates are broken or anything, and we say, okay, you can go and fix them if you want something merged, we are still consuming resources whenever somebody submit a patch in those branches, even if it's just to have a conversation. So I'm okay to leave the branch open, but we just remove all the jobs. It's like, yep, the branch exists. Just don't expect us to merge anything. They're like, we don't care, because there's a point where we have to say, we don't care about Rocky. Sorry. It is really old.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. And I guess the question is, so then do we want to have the sort of black and white approach where once it hits extended maintenance, we could just remove the gates? We keep like PEP8 running, or well, not even that. Some really minimal set of things, or nothing. Or do we want to say, well, we're willing to go up to like Wallaby, say, keep the gates running up to there?
For really, really old ones, I would say not even one job.
Just everything gone.
Literally. For Rocky, I would say we don't care. And make it clear, not even a job would run there. You have the Gerrit available if you want to have a conversation with someone. But it's not going to get a +1 from CI, or if it gets, we don't care. Nobody's going to review that thing on its review duties. We have enough with what we have.
Sorry, guys.
Where do you draw the line? Where do you draw the line, though? That's the question, isn't it? If it's EM, then you should be doing the same for train, and I'm sure that your employers would not be happy about that until 16.x is EOL'd.
That's irrelevant. Yeah, sorry, that's irrelevant. We can do the decision on the community side without caring about the downstream side. That's part of the promise that Red Hat makes, and I think it's public even. So don't think about that part. If I can say something, Felipe, no, you wanted to say something, I think.
Yeah, I was just asking, what do you mean by really old? So, can you explain the amount of years, like, or release that you can consider? Okay, this is really old. No, this is not.
How old is old?
Yeah, yeah. That's my question.
Is old. No, that's your line. When something becomes EM, it's defined by OpenInfra as old.
Yeah, so I think that means that
Rocky's from 2018. I think 10 releases old or something like that can be considered quite old.
And it's Python 2. So we to answer the question from Brian. So where did we put the line? It's not just I don't think it's a matter of drop it immediately when it becomes extended maintenance. But there are some thresholds where you can see that things are starting to go yeah, very bad. And in this case, it's at this point it will be everything which is Python 2.
So what approach would we want to take to that? So we could just declare them old and that we don't want to merge anything into there. I guess we could kill all the gate jobs so they don't consume any resources. Remove all the stable, I don't know, well, they are running some kind of periodic stable job because that's what is all read there. So we remove those. I think we can block anything from merging by changing the Garrett ACLs, maybe. So we couldn't even do it by mistake. So we could, and so I think Luigi makes a good point. I mean, Python, right? Python 2 is certainly a red line. So we could do everything that supports Python 2.
I think train is the first one which was both gating Python 2 and Python 3.
Okay.
And is there any way to have the release team allow us to have an end of life branch and leave the branch?
I think we could propose change. So the current policy, I believe, is that once you tag EOL, then the branch is supposed to be deleted. But we could ask them to just allow us to tag it EOL and to mean we're no longer running any CI on it at all. We're not going to allow anything to merge into it. It exists in Garrett solely for the purpose of the community discussing patches, if anyone is still interested in that branch. And that would seem to be kind of reasonable. I mean, and then what we would do is, so then the project team, if something's in EM and not EOL, that would mean we could still allow stuff to merge to it. We're still running CI on a best effort basis, I guess. Yeah, sorry, Luigi, I missed your in the chat there. Yeah, train's the last one that supports Python 2. So, and that's one reason why I backported that fix to train specifically, was so that we would know it at least ran on one Python 2 release.
So I just wanted to mention, like, it's not just Cinder that was saying we need to eval these branches, but other projects do support this idea as well. I think Nova also commented out on the same thread that they also want to eval this, and yeah, it makes sense for the main projects depending on each other to eval the same branches at the same time. Regarding the CV, I think Brian ended up doing all the work for the backporting, and there were a lot of merge conflicts. We can assume, like, going back to Rocky, there were merge conflicts in each branch, and Brian ended up fixing them. We also got the stable reviewer bandwidth while merging them, so I'm totally in favor of just evaling them. And yeah, even if they want to collaborate, like, they can take reference from the last EM branch, whatever it is, like it is, if it is train, they can take reference from the patch and they can do the changes necessary for them. But yeah, I agree that we can't keep these type of branches open all the time. Like Wallaby is EM, Xena is going to be EM, and that is a 6 branches that are in EM state. So we don't want to keep adding to that list.
I guess Jeremy's point was that even though they're in EM, you don't have to we don't have to really do anything.
Yeah, I was reading
We have
the
been,
note.
because I'm sorry.
Yeah, the note literally says that if a branch is marked as extended maintenance, that means individual projects can be in a state maintain, unmaintain, last, or end of life. So we can just say this is a maintain. It is like that branch, we don't maintain it, so we remove the gates, but it's not end of life. It's just we don't maintain it.
So when do we end of life something? We have to end of life things eventually. There has to be a line we draw to an EOL and EM, you know, and otherwise you'll just end up with everything EM and never EOL anything anymore, which would not be a good thing.
That's true.
Although if we are not doing anything with those branches, then it's really just a load on Garrett, right?
Yeah, but I think it is it's from a conceptual point of view. At some point you have to say this is end of life. Even if you leave the branch, conceptually you cannot keep saying forever extended maintenance and say, yeah, but we don't maintain it. It's like, no, then just say it's end of life and leave the branch. Probably we can try that. That would make more sense. And say end of life, so there are no jobs, there is nothing.
Yeah,
but the branch is still there for reference or whatever you want to say.
What happens when we've got, let's say we've EOL'd Rocky, but we leave Rocky hanging around. Okay, we leave that branch there for people to look at and reference, right? What happens when they want to then find that there is a problem there's an interacting problem with Nova and OS Brick, but those branches have been deleted because they've been EOL'd by those projects. We can't just be the only one that leaves these branches around. If it's EOL, we have to do what everyone else does with EOL, which is delete the branch. Now it comes back to the question is, yes, someone's asking about this, but what's the impact to the community, the whole world? How many people are they talking about? Is it one customer? Is it 25,000 customers?
So how would it be if we proposed that we can separate the tagging of EOL from the deletion of the branch?
You mean by separating, doing it for every project?
Yeah, so like we just
Simon,
say, look,
Simon is saying, be consistent through the whole OpenStack.
Right. So we could just declare that as far as our project resources go, Rocky is end of life, but we don't delete it in case Neutron and Nova still want to support it. So it's still there. If the community has interest, it can still be worked on.
I think Simon is right in saying
what I'm saying is, let's be consistent. If Nova and Neutron and Glance and everybody else, when they hit EOL, they delete the branch, we have to do the same thing.
Right. What I'm saying is, well, maybe if the model for extended maintenance is this extended collaboration thing, then maybe we should be marking stuff EOL, but not deleting the branches.
Well, that means going to that means going to every project and getting them to agree to that.
Yeah, but that's right. I would have to propose this to the TC. But I'm just wondering if that's worth doing or whether.
Okay, so let's say we propose it to the TC and the TC approve, and this is a new rule. I don't know whether rule is the right word or not when it comes out from the TC. Edict, dictate. What happens for those projects that have already EOL'd and deleted Rocky or Stein when we get around to that point? Because a lot of these have already got rid of them, so we're stuck in this sort of purgatory, effectively.
Well, I think part of this would be see what is the common ground, the common denominator. Where of these EM branches still have everything? Yeah. And anything that it's before that, older than that, we have to delete the branches to be consistent when we end of life those. And Anything after that, we change to the new model. So I think, again, I agree with you, Simon. It has to be consistent across everything. If we have some branches for Cinder, we have to have them for every single project. And
Or
so
least,
it's basically
at least the core projects. At the very least, the core projects.
Yep.
Just to make it consistent, I think it's better if the release team does it in a single patch for all the projects, rather than each project individually doing it on their own. One question I had for Brian, like if we separate the deleting of branch to the tagging of EOL, like if we separate these two things, what's the difference between like tagging EM and tagging EOL then? Like what difference would it make in that process?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I think that the difference would be with EM, we're still willing to review and possibly merge changes that could be useful to people still using that stuff, even though it doesn't have full support.
Isn't EM also for CVEs and security patches as well?
Yeah. So it would mean that it's still, so with extended maintenance, it's still best effort to get stuff into those branches, but that we're still willing to do it. And then when we declare DOL, we're just saying as the project team does not have resources to continue to do this.
And it has to be very clear. It has to be very clear that we will not do anything. You can ask as many times as you want. We are not going to do it. And that's what, and taking the gates away from those EOLs would be the appropriate thing to do.
And dropping all the patches. But then what we, what do we gain if we just tag the last version and keep the branch rather than removing the branch? If we're not going to merge anything anymore there, just that the people can submit patches.
Yeah, it's just so that people apparently are still using Rocky.
And that's on their fault. Sorry, I'm very strong on this. Also in other community, it's on their own. If they are still using things that the community marked as deprecated, I mean, I'm still barred from the time in Dublin when we kept introduce this new model instead of dropping stuff every 3 or 4 cycles, semesters. So I think it's becoming too long and it's becoming too complicated to maintain too many things. And I'm not even a core, so I can only imagine the difficulty.
Well, I think that I appreciate that. And that's been my position in the past, is just we should be deleting this stuff faster and moving. But on the other hand, you've got the community of people who are actually working on this, and then the community of people who are consuming it. And the consumers have an interest in keeping stuff maintained a bit, in the sense that if it's absolutely essential, they want to maintain it. And that's sort of what's happening with Rocky. So what they want is it's not just like one person. There's several people interested in being able to post a patch and at least get it reviewed by some other people, or at least have a common place where they can put it so that each of them can take it.
Does it mean they're also going to?
Is this a specific distro? Because if it is, then that distro can fork it now before we EOL it and get rid of it.
Yeah, I guess, but right. It's always possible to fork it whenever, but I don't know that that's in the interest of the community to have lots and lots.
But it's not. This is not community, though, is it? It sounds to me like a company and a distro that they run. And if it's not, and it's just regular consumers, they should not be running Rocky. Seriously, they shouldn't be upgrading to something more stable.
I understand that point. I just think that it is not too costly to just leave a branch. That's my take. If there are no CI jobs, there are no review bandwidth spent of that. We clearly mark this is end of life. I think the cost is not high to just have the branch there. That's my take, but I don't have a strong opinion on this. It's just that I think if there is a group of people that could benefit from having a branch there, and
But if we're not going to merge anything, sorry, Gorka, but if we're not going to merge anything, what's the purpose of keeping the branch? That you have that bunch of patches on Gerrit, but then the patches may conflict one on the other. So the people should also ensure that the patches are stuck together so they are not conflicting. I don't know.
Oh, I see your point. Yeah. That the benefit only lasts like a month. After that, you have so many patches that have been under review and never merged that it's useless. Yep.
Yeah,
I have to say that is a strong point.
Yeah, retaining the branch would indicate to me that there's a chance that it's going to be accepting more patches. And just because we might delete the branch, in the community's code, whoever is interested in the code for their own deployment probably has their own local branch.
Exactly, yeah. And you're right.
Or they can, of course, create one from the tag.
Yeah, and you're right. And if the branch is still there, it sort of implies it's available for modifying.
And to be totally clear, this is not always the case because I'm also involved in outside the work in other communities where the branches of the old versions are kept, but the idea there, the convention there was that from the beginning, you know that the old branches are not going to be touched anymore. So no one is going to take care of them. Here we have different, for the record, that's the KDE community. For here, we have different expectations. We have been building different expectations for more than 10 years. So it's different. So it's true that keeping the branch open doesn't automatically imply that people may think that things can be merged there, but that's the expectations here.
Okay. All right. This is very helpful. So then it seems like the sense is we could stick with the current model, but we need to EOL stuff and delete it, possibly up to train.
Oh, I think
definitely
Gorka would like that. Gorka would like all the way to Z.
No, Wallaby would be fine as well. Up to Wallaby. But at least I think somebody said that there was a fine line between Python 2 and 3, and I think that can be a first step to say anything that's only Python 2, gone.
Which would be Rocky, but not Stein.
Is Rocky? I thought Rocky was both.
Wasn't that Train?
I thought
no. Train's the last one that supported Python 2.
But
Stein, I believe
Stein does 3 and 2, but I thought Rocky was just 2. Might be wrong.
This links. Yeah, Stein is both 2 and 3. And Rocky's not even listed. I think the records don't go back.
Yeah. Hence why we should delete it.
I'm okay to delete everything. Well, to end of life and everything older than Train. At the bare minimum.
Yeah, and it might be a mindset thing, but yeah, evaluating the branch and deleting it would certainly let me think like we have less work to do.
All right, but I think the EOLing I guess the tradition is each of the projects has pretty wide latitude in OpenStack. So I think it makes more sense to do it consistently, but I don't know. All right, then. So as far as what Cinder wants to do, we can do that within the current structure. If we want to propose train, anything older than train. So did you want to keep train around at this point or ditch it also? It's the last vestige of Python 2. I guess this is one of those things we can discuss on the mailing list.
It's getting rid of train wouldn't make my life a lot easier because I've got all these customers running OSB 16 I don't have to backport for.
The initial thread was for Rocky and Stein, these two branches, but yeah, we can surely update if we change our thoughts about train.
Yeah, let's do EOL, Rocky, and Stein, and then maybe go to the TC with that suggestion, but find what the lowest common denominator is for existing core branches that are still EM.
All right, I think Nova EOL Rocky and Stein in like November, which.
I mean, ironic, you're trying to go as high as Wallaby.
I think, Brian, you or I could reply to that thread. Recently updated, from Cinder perspective. And yeah, we can also propose like release team doing this EOL, else we will end up with all the inconsistent EOL branches across OpenStack.
Okay. Why don't I'll volunteer to write something in an Etherpad that you can look over and make sure I've said what went on here correctly. And then we can send it out.
Sure, that sounds good.
Okay. Yeah, and then, okay, so then my just sort of feeling about the EM branches is that as a team, we're sort of committed to those. So it always bothers me when Jeremy says in the IRC, oh, it's not a big deal. You're not really committed to those. It seems like if we've got CI running and we look at the patches, we really do kind of.
Yeah,
so
the name itself.
Sorry, go on.
The name itself, it says maintenance. So it's extended maintenance. It's like, yeah, it is maintained. Otherwise, they should have changed the name to something else. Unknown, I don't care, but that name is misleading.
And this sort of goes back to a conversation that I had on IRC. I asked Rajat, I think yesterday, about third-party CIs and what branches we should actually still be checking against. Should we be checking against EMs or just stables? Because that makes a difference for our resources as well, and we don't have anywhere near the size of resources as the main Gerrit system.
I would say, just my opinion, development and maintenance. That's it for third-party drivers. The requirement, they may choose to do more and also include EM, but I don't think that would be fair because just the maintenance and development, those are 5 branches. That's quite a bit.
Yeah, but this is where we've also had this discussion in the past about, when vendors are backporting things and we're not seeing their CI systems passing, even on stable branches. So I think we should be saying that vendor CI should, at the very least, be doing all stable branches, but not EM ones.
Yeah, so regarding that, we had patches in the stable branches where CI was not running or failing. So we did introduce this part where the vendor could say, I have tested this.
I remember. I know we did that, but that's an easy cop out, and we don't know that they've 100% done it. And I've been guilty of that myself. Of not having a CI that can do something, and I've said it works, and I have tested it, and it is an honor system at the end of the day. But I don't know. We do need to, I think, have a minimum requirement for CIs, for third-party CIs, whether it's master and current, the latest stable, or the stable's back to where it starts going EM. But maybe that's another discussion for another time.
I mean, I agree to that. So at any point where we have the development branch, we have the last 3 branches as maintained in stable. So during this development cycle of Bobcat, we will move Xena to extended maintenance. Right now, Wallaby is in EM, and Xena will also move to that in this cycle. Yoga, Zed, and Antelope would be the maintained branches. So I think it shouldn't be too hard because there is not a lot of code difference also across these branches. They are pretty recent. So from Yoga to Bobcat, I think it should be maintainable. But again, we have some CIs that don't even pass on master. So yeah. I don't know.
But also we've got that whole change from focal to jammy that went on across that as well. We've got that across that boundary. That's going to cause all sorts of problems. We need to be, and this is where I think I mentioned it earlier on, we need to ensure that the third-party CIs are running the correct version of Ubuntu.
Yeah, and even Python. I remember we had some, while doing the change from Python 2 to Python 3, a lot of CIs were still using Python 2 for quite a long time. So
maybe it's a conversation we can have in Vancouver, if anyone's going to be there.
Yeah, sounds good. I will just mention it so we don't forget about it. I've noted it down on the Etherpad, and if I missed anything, please feel free to edit or add to it.
That looks good. I just saw Gorka's comment in the chat there.
Okay, so I think we have pretty clear action items on this one. One more thing I added to the PTG was the team photo, which I initially forgot. So tomorrow before the operator hour, we can probably join a Google Meet session because that has worked for the best for those screenshots. So I can create a link and put it down just before the operator hour, and we can join and do the photo session there. So yeah, just wanted to mention this. And we don't have any other topic for today. Ideally, I bring up a topic from later days to today, but we also have less number of topics in other days. I don't think we will be running the whole PTG time or 1300 to 1700 UTC, but hopefully we will end up with new topics. Like Eddie Lee just brought up the FIPS topic for tomorrow, which we'll be discussing in before the operator hour. So yeah, feel free to add any topics to like discuss with me or add it to the planning Etherpad, and I will keep checking that Etherpad before the PTG days to include that in our schedule later. Friday we rarely have any topics, so plenty of room for topic discussions. Yeah, any final comments before we close out for today? Okay, guess not. So I will just stop the recording.